2002 through 2009 Toyota 4runner with the 4.7 liter V8 radiator and thermostat replacement. I'm Brian Eslick from How To Automotive, and I'm going to walk you through the steps for replacing the radiator and thermostat. So I dropped down the lower skid plate from underneath the car, opened up the petcock, and I got a bucket underneath catching the coolant as it's draining. This skid plate was only held on with 4 12mm bolts. Looking up towards the fan shroud, you can see the 2 transmission cooler lines here. They're held on with these little catches. We need to open them up and free the transmission cooler lines from the fan shroud here. So I'm using a flat blade screwdriver, and I'm just going to flare this little tab open, and then the transmission cooler lines will be free. After popping the 2 catches open, you can go ahead and lower the vehicle back down. If you raised it up, if you crawled underneath, you're going to go back to top, or we're going to remove the top engine cover by removing the 2 10mm acorn nuts that are holding the cover on. So once you get those removed, you can lift it up and set it aside. Now we need to get the air snorkel off, so loosen up the 2 10mm hose clamps. Once I get those hose clamps removed, I'm going to pull the air snorkel and just kind of flip it up out of my way. So you're going to make sure you got both of those clamps loose. Then we need to pop off a vacuum hose right here. Once you get the air snorkel removed and flipped out of your way, now we have access to the thermostat here. So we need to remove the 3 12mm nuts that are holding the thermostat housing on. To remove those nuts, I just used a 12mm wrench, and I loosened up the bottom nut first and then removed the 2 top nuts. Once you get it free, you may have to tap it with a hammer to get it to come off. It gets stuck on there. Once you get it free, you can pull out the thermostat and just remove it from the housing like this. Now we need to remove this plastic cover that goes over the core support, and it's held on with these clips. So you're just going to pop these clips out. You'll just follow around the perimeter of the plastic cover, removing the clips until they're all free. There'll also be a couple down below, down by the bumper right here. Once you get all the clips removed, you can just lift it off and set it aside for now. Now we can pull off the overflow hose here from the radiator neck and then pull it out of the fan shroud right here over towards the bottle. After that, we need to remove the 10mm bolts holding the bottle on. To do that, I'm going to use my Milwaukee M12 1/4" ratchet here to make quick work of that with a 10mm deep socket. So I'll remove the 2 on the top with the ratchet, and then there's going to be a 1/3 one below. And to make it easier to get to, I'm going to remove the transmission cooler line right here. So I'm going to use a pair of needle nose pliers, pull the hose clamp back, and pull the hose off. I came in from an angle like this with the needle nose pliers, pulled the hose clamp off. You can also give the hose a twist left and right to help break that free and pull that hose off. Once you get that pulled off, right below the nipple is the 10mm bolt holding the 3rd 10mm bolt holding the bottle on. Go ahead and remove that. Once you get that removed, you can lift the bottle off and set aside. Our next task is going to be to remove the fan, so we need to remove the nuts on the fan shroud. But before we get to that, we need to remove the upper radiator hose and tuck it out of the way. Now I'm going to use a wrench, and I'm going to loosen up the 12mm nuts on the fan here, and I'm going to hold the fan in place with a special wrench designed to hold it. And this is what it looks like here. It has this hook on it, the hook around one ear of the nut, and hook a wedge against the other nut, and then you can pry it. I will link this tool up in the description of the video, and I'll show you how it works. So as you can see, it hooks onto the bolts right here, and then you can hold it with one hand and then loosen up the nut. And then once you get the nut loose, then what you do is you just use the tool here to rotate the fan so you can get to the next nut. And when I do this, I just loosen the nuts up and then rotate it, loosen up the next nut, rotate it, loosen up the next nut, rotate it until all of them are loose, and then I remove all the nuts. Once you get them all removed, then you're going to just wiggle the fan back left and right to get it to come off. Once you get it off, you just lower it down until it's resting on the bottom of the fan shroud. Now we need to unbolt the fan shroud. So there's a 10mm bolt here and a 10mm bolt here, and at the bottom there's just little hooks where it hooks into. So once you get these 2 top 10mm bolts removed, you're going to lift the fan shroud straight up with the fan at the same time. Once again, I'm using my Milwaukee M12 ratchet to make quick work of that. I will link this up in the description of the video along with all the parts. Now you can lift the fan shroud up and pull the fan blade itself out. Once you get the fan blade out, then you can finish pulling the fan shroud out. Now that the fan shroud is out, we're going to take off the lower transmission cooler line here. So you'll pull that hose clamp off and pull this hose off. And just tuck it out of your way for now. Now you're going to need a 12mm socket and a pretty long extension. I got a couple of them linked together here. And what we're going to do is we're going to look straight down through the grill right here, just to the right of the and to the left of the license plate here. And you're going to look through here and you're going to see the bolt inside the frame there. So I'll run the extension through like this and put it on the nut there, and you can see where I'm going right there. And now you're going to remove that 12mm bolt. And once you get that bolt loosened up and backed out, I use a magnet to retrieve it. So I used a long pencil magnet like this and went through there and then put it on the bolt and then pulled the bolt out. So once you get the one on the passenger side, you're going to go over to the driver's side, just to the right of the license plate frame, and you do the exact same thing. It's going to go through the grill and then through the frame there and remove that 12mm bolt. And to make quick work of that task, I'm using my Milwaukee 3/8 drive impact wrench here. So once you get those bolts removed, we're going to remove the two upper bolts. So if you look at the radiator neck, just below it right here is a 12mm bolt. We're going to remove that there. And then on the opposite side, right here, just to the right of the headlight, we're going to remove that bolt there. Once you get those two bolts removed, then you could just lift the radiator straight up and out. Now what I like to do is take the new radiator and the old radiator and lay them side by side, because we need to transfer some of the hardware over from the old radiator to the new radiator. Some radiators will come with the hardware, some will not. This one didn't, so I'm going to transfer this over to the new radiator. So I'm just going to, exactly the way they are, just peel them off and then reinstall them into the new radiator. I'm also going to take the lower hose here, take it off, and transfer it over to the new radiator. One thing I wanted to point out is the top grommet here has this little hook. So you want to make sure that that hook is facing downwards. So I put these radiators side by side so you can just transfer them straight over onto the new one. And that hook will hook into this little hole right here on the core support that holds it in place. So it's important that you get that in place. And I just used a flat blade screwdriver to peel off the old one from the old radiator and transfer it over to the new one. So now we're ready to reinstall the radiator back into the vehicle. So you'll lower it down to position, being careful not to snag it on anything. Just take your time. And the radiator hose, you'll have to kind of maneuver it and push it aside and get it to go down inside there. Once you get it down inside there, that little hook that was on that grommet, you're going to hook it on the core support, and that'll hold it in place. And then you can start the top bolts. A little trick I like to do is take a little piece of paper and put it in the socket, and then put the bolt in the socket, and that'll hold it in place. Just makes it easier to start the bolts. Once you get all four of the bolts started, you can go ahead and run them down and tighten them all up. That's including the ones on the lower portion of it through the grill too. Now we're going to take our new thermostat with a new gasket and install it with the bleeder screw here pointing upwards. So we're going to install that into the housing here with the bleeder screw upwards like this. And you just press it in there till it sits flush. And then you're going to take the housing here and put it over and start the 3 nuts and tighten those all up. So if you notice, I did not take the belt off when I did this. I left it on. Sometimes this pulley here will pop off. So if it does, you may have to remove the belt and slide the pulley back on in position and put your fan shroud and your fan back in. But mine did not pop off, so I'm going to go ahead and just make sure this radiator hose is out of the way, and I'm going to go ahead and lower the fan shroud and fan back in. So when we install this fan, at the bottom of the fan shroud has these little hooks here, and they're going to hook into the bottom of the radiator. There's a little catch down here just underneath the radiator hose right there, and there's going to be one on the driver's side also. Right there. So those have to slide into those little hooks. So now we're going to slide the radiator fan shroud and fan down into position. So you slide the fan shroud about halfway in like this. Then we'll take the fan and slide it in like this, and then finish lowering the fan shroud and fan together down into position. As you're lowering it down and you get it pretty close into position, you can go ahead and slide the fan back over the 4 studs on the pulley. Now that I got the fan shroud and the fan back into position and the fan back on the pulley, as you can see here, then I go ahead and start the nuts. So I just reach down like this, kind of turn your hand backwards, and you can start the nuts. And then I slowly draw in one of the nuts. And then what I do is I'll rotate it around and I'll start another nut. and I'll draw it in a little bit with a couple turns with the wrench, and then I'll put another nut on and I'll draw it in with a couple turns with the wrench, and I kind of work back and forth until the fan draws the pulley in flush. Once I have all 4 of the nuts started and the fan is pretty much drawn in completely flush, then I'll use the fan clutch tool here to hold it in place while I tighten the bolts. So I'll tighten one of the nuts, then I'll rotate it, and then I'll tighten the next nut and I'll rotate it until it's all complete. I'll link this tool up in the description of the video. Once the fan is all bolted back up, then I'll just make sure that the fan shroud is into the little grooves on the bottom, and then I'll start the 2 bolts and tighten those up. Once I get the 2 bolts back in the fan shroud on the left and right side, then I'll take the upper radiator hose and put it back onto the radiator and put the clamp back on. Now you can go ahead and install the 2 transmission cooler lines to put the clamps back on. And once you get these 2 lines back on, you can actually reach down and re-secure the little holders on the bottom of the fan shroud down there. If you look down here, at least the top one here, you can get to and crimp it around and lock it into place. Once you get those re-secured, then you can take the coolant overflow bottle here and reinstall that bottle with the three bolts, and then reroute the hose over to the filler neck. Then we can reinstall this plastic cover that went over the core support, put all the clips back in. Now you can take the air snorkel here and flip it back into position and re-secure it onto the throttle body and the air box. Resecure the hose clamps, and then make sure that the air filter is installed right, and reinstall the vacuum line that went to the power steering pump up to the air snorkel. Once you get that all reinstalled, then you can take the top engine cover and put it back on, and then start the 2 acorn nuts and tighten those up. Now back from underneath the vehicle, you can go ahead and make sure that the lower transmission cooler line is resecured onto the fan shroud. Once you got that done, then you can take the lower skid plate shield here and lift it back up into place. There's 2 little hooks on the end of the shield here that hook onto the core support here, so you hook it on there so it'll kind of hold it in place. Then you can swing it up into position and start the 4 mounting screws. Then you can run all 4 of those bolts in and tighten them up. I'm using the Milwaukee 3/8 drive impact wrench to make quick work of that. After you get all 4 of those bolts started and tightened down, then you can take the car and lower it back down and fill the radiator with 50/50 Toyota approved coolant. Also fill the overflow bottle up to the full mark on the bottle here. Then what I like to do is start the car and put the blower speed on low and put the temp on high, and make sure that the AC and defrost are all turned off. Then I'll let the vehicle run for about 10 to 15 minutes until the thermostat opens up, making sure that the radiator is full. After running the vehicle for about 10 or 15 minutes, you want to check that lower radiator hose to make sure it's warm. When that thermostat opens up, that lower radiator hose gets warm. Then you'll double check that your coolant is at the proper level. Go ahead and put on the radiator cap, and that'll complete the job of replacing the radiator and thermostat on a Toyota 4runner. I will link up all the parts in the description of the video. I'm Brian Eslick from How To Automotive. I'd like to thank you guys for watching my videos, encourage you to subscribe, invite you to head over to the howtoautomotive.com website for more valuable videos like this, and also to remind you that when it comes to working on cars, experience is everything. Thank you again for watching.